morning. Good morning. The podium is all my fault, so I apologize to all of you because I'm about to do this. But I'll explain that one later on. Welcome, Danielle Sutton, Chief People Officer of Pinterest, and Katie Burke, Chief Operating Officer of Harvey. We were chatting backstage about the fact that the pandemic now in the rearview mirror almost feels nostalgic in a way. It was crazy, it was insane. People had real amazing hardships, but we also were very focused on employees. It feels different today. The world feels very fraught, challenging, hard, and there's also this tension between employer and employee that's, I think, at almost an all-time high. I've seen AI give people incredible capabilities. I've seen it help people advance careers, but we can also read the news and the headlines. Snowflake's CIO at a customer conference last week said that he had laid off employees in order to drive the rest of his engineers to adopt AI, and called it let me get this right, provocative move on his part. So how we find balance in all this is hard. I live in San Francisco, the epicenter of craziness. I've been there since the first tech boom in the late 90s. This feels even crazier than that. We're sort of in hardcore mode in a lot of different places, and this comes up. Katie, let's start with you. You've described the fact that it is incredibly intense at Harvey. How do you find the balance, and what's the balance look like for your organization?
Yes, I think one of the challenges we're navigating is the headlines. So the reality is the laying people off to be provocative is part of what makes a headline. And it makes a great headline. A lot of people will read it, a lot of people will share it. The truth is much more complicated, and I think, as you mentioned, I think a lot of people are talking past each other. On one hand, we have employers glorifying hustle culture and saying AI pill everything. And on the opposite side of things, I think, which is equally unhelpful, which is a hard truth, is employees saying, well, if we just keep things the same as they were in, the good old days during the pandemic where we were focused on employees, neither of those is tenable or the solution. And so, as is often the case, as people leaders, as employer brand, as folks who, our job is to help navigate that gray and to create some color, to paint with some color there. And so I think, to your point, at Harvey, what we're doing is we are a rapidly growing AI company servicing legal teams, which is a great opportunity, great privilege, and also comes with the fact that because of our pace, we get a lot of commentary around burnout or potential for burnout, and then also just a lack of connectivity. When we're hiring as many people as we are, people want the human connection. Danielle and I were lucky enough to be in the same pandemic group, and we would meet weekly. She and I bonded. We'll be friends for life, whether she likes it or not.
Therapy.
But because of group therapy, but because you're sharing inherently human experiences. And I think the reality is that makes a huge difference. And so I think our job is to find that gray in that space and just to acknowledge people are craving it and create programming that helps facilitate that.
You've also, when you say grown a lot, you mean a lot, 200 to 1,000 employees in this?
Yeah, so I joined Harvey a year and a half ago. We were 200 employees in 3 offices. We are now 1,000 employees in 13 offices. And so it is chaos. Yeah, for anyone who looks tired, I feel tired, I look tired. And at the same time, I think one of the things we need to do is everyone in this room thinks everyone else has it easier. So for example, if you're at a SaaS company right now, I know what it's like. It's really hard. You're trying to do more with less. You're trying to reinvent yourselves with AI. On the flip side, if you're at an AI company, you're trying to figure out what it means to compete with the models. If you're at a model company, you're under intense pressure. Like everyone, part of it is just like empathy is the key ingredient here. Yeah. No one here, respectfully, is crushing and has it all figured out, myself included. And if we all just put our puzzle solving hats on, there's a lot more we can accomplish together. And so yeah, Harvey is experiencing incredible growth, and with great growth comes great responsibility and a ton more problems.
More challenges.
In the best way possible.
More challenges.
Yes.
So we're going to get you more coffee afterwards, and all of us are going to get more coffee.
Perfect.
Danielle, AI forward is how Pinterest describes itself, I believe. And you've said that this now applies to every role. So it's clearly grown for you all well beyond the sort of engineering and customer support.
For sure. I mean, when we first began this journey, we've been on it for nearly 2 years now, and like many companies, we began with a focus on learning, on skill development, on demystifying sort of some of the headlines and getting people comfortable with using the tools, and hosting a lot of pilots, and encouraging folks to use Glean and Helix and Gemini and all the other tools we were offering. And I'd say for the better part of the last 6 to 9 months, through our initiative focus called AI Forward. You're absolutely right. Now we're establishing a foundation, an expectation that every single employee should have competency in using some AI tool. And we're being very deliberate and focusing our attention in that way and being very clear and articulating exactly, well, what does that look like for this employee in this role at this level? At the same time, we're also building expectation for our managers, because they're the ones, let's be honest, that are really facilitating how this takes place, creating the culture of adopting these new tools, and so making sure they are setting the right context, they are creating the capacity for their teams to learn and experiment, that they are monitoring the utilization, making sure it's being used responsibly, ethically, all the governance that we have in place. We're holding them accountable for doing so. But yes, we're on this journey, and like Katie said, no one has it all figured out, but we are very intentional, and that won't change anytime soon.
Are there practical things you've done with managers to help them? Because managers in almost every survey we look at have the highest rate of burnout, right? They're the ones that are feeling the pressure the most.
Yeah.
And you've also got like the Jack Dorsey memo on the other side of it saying we can get rid of the human routers as managers.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the fact they play a core role.
Oh my God, and no disrespect to Jack. I mean, he's obviously been very successful in his career, but I do think we should be careful not to suggest that one size fits all. I think if you were to read his latest article, he suggests that one manager, him or herself, could look after and manage hundreds of employees. I'd say this will look different at every organization, and the journey that we're on right now, and I'll be honest, we started our focus on people managers over 2 years ago. Our premise was we wanted to be known as the company who developed the best managers in tech, and that was even before this surge of AI. So now this has really come in and helped us really codify on top of our blueprint for what it means to lead at Pinterest for our managers. What are the new expectations that they will now have to integrate among everything else? They are all of them are player coaches, so we don't have managers whose only job is to manage. They are managing while they're doing, and so having the skills and capability to do that well is what we're focused on. So there's a lot of curated curriculum focused specifically on helping them become better at navigating tensions, at making enterprise-level decisions, at how do you disagree and commit, how do you accelerate fast feedback loops in order to execute better. So we are very focused on up-leveling the capability of all of our people managers.
That's fantastic. Katie, at the rate of growth you guys have had, how do you manage that from a management structure standpoint, training and support for people who are in that epicenter of like, I'm bringing more people in than I've ever probably brought in before?
I'm a big believer in like, what do you do when you're lost? You go right back to the basics. It's like, what do we know super well? Well, if you think back, like we're at the start of summer, a bunch of kids are going to camp. What do you do the first day you get to camp? You create a ritual so people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. Okay, that's what we're doing at Harvey. It's like my first investment when I got on board was in onboarding. If you're going to quadruple the company in 8 months, you need to make sure people feel like they're a bigger part of something and that they have baseline expectations on what it means to be part of Harvey. Same thing, we announced our values, codified our values. We only have 3 of them. And one of the things our founders asked, by the way, they're 31 and 34 respectively. And one of the things they asked is they're like, don't you have to have 5? And I was like, no, there's no like corporate edict that requires you to have 5 values. So it turns out we did 3, and it turns out most people at Harvey remember them and know them, and that's because of the founding and onboarding. Now, I think when you're growing that fast, there's an enthusiasm, especially from the people team, to do like 9 million other things. And the truth of the matter is we do the basics really well. Tara on my team is responsible for hiring. She's in the back. She's responsible for hiring, I think, approximately 800 of those 1,000 people. And so a lot of what we come back to is just like, what are the basics that we know we care about? We need folks who care deeply about our mission. We need people to show up for our customers. We need a whole lot of lawyers. Turns out if you're going to train lawyers to use AI, you need to recruit a whole lot of lawyers. But given that, then anything else becomes a bonus. And the same is true of when we think about our managers. I wish 2 years ago we had set out to be the best managers in tech. We were not as forward-thinking as Pinterest. But part of what we're doing for managers is just the basics. Here are the basics of what you need to know at Harvey and how we manage both agents and people. Here's how we're going to make sure you have the equipment you need. And here's how one thing I do think people should think about is going back to the basics, but also not being afraid to think outside the box. So I think in the same vein of you don't have to have 5 corporate values, the same is true of management training. It doesn't have to be a 6-week commitment. If everything else, if all other timelines are getting condensed, you can do something that's a bit more agile and a bit more fun and a bit more differentiated. And so oftentimes when I get proposals from vendors to say this is what we're doing for Harvey, they'll say we just gave the same pitch to Danielle at Pinterest. I'm like, but we're totally different companies and organizations. And so part of it is how do you customize things so people feel like they're part of something meaningful, and that requires differentiation. And the reality is that means not doing the same thing everyone else has done since the dawn of time.
That also means you've got to invest your own resources in doing it, too.
It does, but I think the temptation is to think about how hard it is. And one of the benefits of AI is like a lot of our enablement work has gotten meaningfully better in the last 4 months, and that's because of using Claude skills, candidly. Yeah. It's not because of some form of programming. And so it's actually taken the work from like, what could this be and how much time could it take, to how about if this took 90 seconds instead of 90 hours? That's where you should really lean into AI adoption, is to make some of those things a little easier. So then you can focus on, when you are bringing people together, being really intentional and creative.
Yeah. You're both describing too, like performance standards that are going up, yeah. Right? The people are required to, managers have more load on them. They have to rise to the moment as well. That's also tied in with people have seen layoffs, happening across organizations. Mm-hmm. The churn is higher in multiple places. You've both, Katie at HubSpot and Danielle more recently at Pinterest, have led companies through layoffs. Katie, I'll start with you. Like, what lessons did you learn? What would you do differently next time around? Because all of us I've been in tech for 25 years. I've been through more rounds than I'd care to admit.
I think the worst thing you can promise people is certainty, right? I think actually the worst thing that happened in the dawn of layoffs was CEOs stood up and said, we're never going to do layoffs, we're not going to do layoffs, we're not going to do layoffs. And then they reversed it, which completely destroys trust. And so I actually think the thing that we do at Harvey is we don't say definitively, this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to do. This is our bet for the next 3 to 6 months. This is what you can expect for the next 3 to 6 months. Here's what we're building. Yeah. If you want to join us, we would love to have you. But I think actually the temptation to promise certainty is the biggest mistake we're making. Yeah. And instead to say to people, here's our current standard. Here is how we're going to help you meet that standard. That's the part that people often miss, but not trying to promise certainty in the next year or 2 years. I think that's that's where we went wrong, is promising people certainty that we just couldn't deliver on.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. And since ours is certainly still much fresher, we announced 15% workforce reduction in late January. So we're very much still in the thick of it all. Even though the events happen, there is a hangover, a cultural hangover that organizations deal with, and it's largely myself and my team helping the rest of the business sort of navigate through that. I've done a million of them, and one of the things that I learn is it's like the first time every time. Yeah. And I wish to approach any event, regardless of the frequency, with that same level of empathy, with heart, and with emotion, to not only think about how do you execute this well, which is what I've brought, to the experience, having managed them across many different industries and companies, but also never lose the sense of, approaching it like the first time and meeting the moment with what it requires. I would say the thing that I would do differently, or I want to make sure to spend more time on, having reflected on it, is, well, what happens after? Not just in terms of, how do you get back to working, but what are the messages, the things that you need to focus on organizationally to help people understand the why, the context, what's going to be different, what do we need them to do differently, and being a bit more intentional around that. I think you can't underestimate just how much people are looking for clarity. Yes, the ones that have survived, they're thankful, but they're also wondering, okay, when's the next shoe going to drop? And so I think it's our responsibility to help as quickly as possible to create as much clarity moving forward around laying out those expectations for everyone who's remaining.
Yeah. Related to that, there's a lot of pressure that I hear from people about, and this is anecdotal, but also like almost, culturally weird. The CEO is the hardcore, person out there, and they're the ones that are really pushing and driving this. And the CPO is work-life balance. I don't think either one of you believe that those extremes are true, but how do you find the balance today between you and your CEO? When the world around is like so pressured on them too. There's actually multiple reports that say 70 to 80% of CEOs, depending on which survey you look at, are afraid of losing their own job by next year if they don't see real progress with AI. So they're humans under pressure also. How are you finding the balance in that relationship?
I would say historically, one could argue that that delineation in terms of how it was posed could have been true. I think in today's age, I feel as equally responsible for helping to drive the strategy of the organization and the culture of it, whether it's high performance or whatever the case might be, alongside our CEO and the entire executive team. And for me, I think I have the pleasure of having worked with the CEO of Pinterest for many years, even predating our tenure here together. And it's really important that as a chief people officer, and the advice I would offer anyone is to not only stay connected, but get very, very clear on the decisions that you all need to jointly make together and what's going to be in the best interest of the organization. There's so much going on, and there could be a tendency to just try to address every single thing, but what I've learned is the importance of prioritization and making sure you make the best use of the time that you have together. Because let's face it, we're all moving a million miles a minute, and it's easy to sort of focus on the things that matter most. So creating the space and the time, even if it's in the evening, on the weekends. I can't tell you how many times Bill and I, that's when we have our one-on-ones, because there's just not enough time during the week. But being very intentional on aligning those things that the two of you need to in order to drive the organization forward.
I think I agree with Danielle. I think at the core of the truth of this conversation is no one does their best work when they're scared. And I think what you're saying is CEOs are scared, so too are CHROs. Everyone is scared they're doing it wrong. Everyone is scared they're going to be replaced. So given that, how do you get through it? You drop your armor. So the truth of the matter is the best way to get CEOs and CPOs more connected is to go, hey, I'm concerned I'm hearing this. Here's the data that I'm hearing, or here's what I'm feeling, and I'm worried we're running behind, or I'm worried we're not delivering on our promise, or I'm worried we're burning our people out. But those conversations, you got to be able to have them, and I agree with Danielle, ideally, sometimes in person, just so you can vibe check on what that looks like, but it requires a level of vulnerability that I think we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, and it requires them to have that vulnerability too.
Correct. Yeah. But I think you lead the way. Like if you're the CPO, you lead the way on that. And I think what's really hard is a lot of CPOs want to convey mastery. You want to say, I know what I'm doing, and I get that. But you also have to have the courage to say, no one has ever done this before. Truly, no one has ever done this before. And so, for example, every once in a while when Winston and I are stuck, debating with a lawyer, CEO is always fun. But whenever we're stuck, one of the things I always do is go, neither one of us has done this before. Yes, I've spent more time scaling a company, but also you know more about the AI space and about legal than I do. So given that, what do we know to be true? And I think that's usually the best way to get unstuck.
It's a great place to start from. So a couple rapid fire questions, 30 seconds or less. AI usage as a dimension of performance management, yes or no?
Yes, we've introduced it as a competency, so it absolutely is now moving in that direction.
Yes, competency, not a threat.
There you go, works well. Top-down enablement or bottoms-up champions, what moves the needle more?
I'd go for a bottoms-up champion, tend to drive scale, maybe adoption more quickly from that level.
Just to keep things spicy, top down. Just because Danielle and I agree. The reality is you need a combination of both, but you can't require ICs to drive change for the entire organization. So the reality is senior leaders, we have a lot of senior leaders, not at Harvey, but in general we work with, who will say, I'm helping and supporting, I'm watching to see how it goes. You can't watch, just jump in, water's warm.
Yeah, I would say also we're chatting backstage, and Danielle, you were talking about the fact that leaders themselves showing what they're doing, and
Absolutely.
You with your team
and
showing.
Being vulnerable and just say, hey, I'm learning alongside with you. It's okay to say that. You don't have to appear as though you're an expert in everything. Just own it and role model for how others should do it as well.
Fantastic place to leave off. Danielle, Katie, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And please join me in welcoming Charter's senior reporter, Michelle Peng, to the stage.